Gamescom was great over the summer, and what it actually did was reveal a number of smaller titles that I think some people, especially subscribed to this channel, will be interested in, whether it's medieval, death-defying zombie apocalypses, or of course something a little bit more harking back to the old days. I thought I'd put together some of the most exciting medieval games that will be coming in the next few months or within the next year or so in some cases, to try and bring some interest to it. So without further ado, these are some of the best medieval titles coming in 2025. And actually, I think one in 2024. Okay, well, it's just a title. I wanted to have a deep dive into the highly anticipated Gothic remake by THQ Nordic and Alchemia Interactive. Whether you're a seasoned veteran of the original game or a newcomer ready to explore this, well, dark world, this remake is promising to be something special, so I thought I'd bring your attention to it. So let's break down what makes this game a must-play and how it actually stacks up against the 2001 classic. As a little bit of background for those who might not have played the original Gothic, let's take a quick trip down memory lane. It was released in 2001 by Piranha Bytes, and it was a revolutionary, if I'm going to be honest, RPG that thrust players into a brutal and unforgiving open-world mining colony. You were just a nameless prisoner trying to survive among ruthless convicts, dangerous beasts, and a host of political factions vying for power. What really set Gothic apart was its complex story and immersive atmosphere. The game didn't hold your hand, combat was tough, quests were clearly challenging, and every decision had real consequences. But let's be honest, the game also, well, it had its quirks. I think the reports back in the day were your general 2001 type of game. Controls were, let's say, less than intuitive, and the difficulty curve was steep enough to make even the hardest gamers sweat. Despite it having a successful RPG legendary status, a remake is very much needed. THQ Nordic and Alchemia Interactive have taken on the monumental task of recreating this classic with modern sensibilities. The core story remains the same, you're still that nameless hero, but now you'll be navigating Mytana, which is the whole world that we're set within, with modern graphics, smoother controls, of course trying to fix the issues of the past, and a combat system that still begs to be hard and challenging for the player, but not necessarily keyboard smashing frustration kind of combat. The developers have promised a faithful recreation of the original experience, but with the rough edges all smoothed out. Think of it like Gothic 2.0, a version where the spirit of the original is preserved, but with all the benefits of modern technology. Speaking of technology, let's actually talk about that combat, because it is so imperative to an RPG-like game such as Gothic. The original was known for its punishing and somewhat clunky combat system. It was a love it or hate it kind of affair. The remake, however, keeps this core mechanic intact, but has a much needed update. Expect fluid, responsive action that retains the challenges that Gothic fans love, but without the frustration of battling clunky controls. Yet, this is not the only thing getting an upgrade. Visuals are being completely overhauled using Unreal Engine 5. This exciting new technology, I'm really happy, is getting put into more and more games, as it seems to really be overhauling everything. We've just seen it in a game like Manor. Of course, we've seen newer titles now coming out using UE5, and I'm going to be honest, it seems like one of the biggest upgrades in gaming that we've had across the board in a long time. We're talking about a world that looks and feels more alive than ever before, with lush forests, ominous caves, and crumbling ruins, all rendered with such stunning detail. It's not just a facelift, this is a full-on resurrection. The game world in Gothic is another area where you'll notice significant changes. Whilst the layout will be instantly recognizable to fans of the original, Alchemia Interactive has expanded the overall size by about 30%, meaning there are new areas to explore, more secrets to uncover, and additional quests that seamlessly blend into the existing narrative. This isn't just about making the world bigger, it's about making it more immersive. You'll find that certain areas that were a bit sparse in the original have been fully fleshed out. The attention to detail is incredible, making the exploration way more rewarding and the world more cohesive. Not just this, but the armor and character design will also be seeing major improvements. In the original Gothic, NPCs looked, well, kind of similar. But in the remake, Alchemia are trying to use advanced AI to ensure that each NPC looks unique. No more seeing the same face on half the people you meet in this colony. Armor customization is another really cool addition. You can tweak your armor's appearance and stats, giving you more control over how your character looks and performs within battles. This is a welcome change that adds a great level to the character progression. So the big question is, when is this going to come out? The developers are currently aiming for a 2024 release, and whilst we're kind of edging on the end of the year at this point in time, it still feels like it's nowhere near getting to a final release. Whether it's because they are going to actually delay it or it's going to be dropped out of nowhere, who knows? But what we can say is that there does seem to be quite a lot of success with the feedback from players. 33 years old, this is one of the first games I played and loved forever, waiting for the return of a legend, says the top comment on the Gothic 1 remake when they showcased it at Gamescom. This trailer looks absolutely incredible, and the graphics overhaul is well needed. It's such a unique experience of having this dark sort of fantasy medieval aesthetic, but of course exploring mine colonies, which is a very unique setting that we haven't really looked into all of that much. Of course, there is a lot of pressure bringing back a classic from people's childhoods, especially when the middle-aged men of 2024 know what they love and they won't put up with anything less. And, well, let's just hope that THQ Nordic are up for the task. Have you ever thought of a game that might ask the question, what if a zombie apocalypse hits Birmingham in the 14th century? No, I know nobody has ever pondered upon that. And in fact, if a zombie apocalypse hit Birmingham in 2024, I think most people would be kind of overwhelmed and happy. Yet it does seem that even Birmingham isn't disgusting enough to scare away the Black Death, because that's what God Save Birmingham is all about. This is a game where you're not just dodging the undead, but also dealing with medieval life's greatest hits, and of course, being in a cesspit like Birmingham. Okay, I'm going to stop with the Birmingham jokes. Like the bubonic plague, there's questionable hygiene and occasionally leaky thatched roofs. It's survival, but with a historical twist. This isn't just any old Birmingham. Oh no, this is a painstakingly recreated 14th century market town, where the biggest dangers used to be bad ale and worse roads and the occasional stabbing, but now the streets are crawling with zombified versions of your favourite medieval townsfolk. Remember John the Smith? Yeah, he's after your brain now. This is such a weird and unique game, and actually this came out at Gamescom. I don't think anybody expected to. I think one of the top comments on the trailer was someone saying, God Save Birmingham, actually, can we not? Even people that live in Birmingham want to get out of it. As a side thing, by the way, if anyone's not from the UK, it's just, it has a reputation. I'll just say that. You need to be scavenging for food, water, and weapons, which means raiding the old tavern for more than just a pint. The game mechanics are all about, well, stacking chairs to block doors, tripping over buckets when you're running for your life. Yes, they have full physics-based wandering and terrain within this title, because at the end of the day, it is a medieval zombie apocalypse game. And hopefully, jokes aside, they can actually do something impressive with this. I know that not many titles have really attempted this, and the ones that have just haven't quite hit the nail on the head. There was a game called The Black Death that came around in 2016, 2017 time, and it got a bit of popularity at the start since it was, you know, a survival game when they were all of the rage, set in medieval worlds, and of course within Europe and the Black Death. So bringing that into this title, hopefully a bit more successfully, could be a unique experience to play within this time era. Let's not forget, you have this chance to explore these historical landmarks like the Church of St. Martin in the Bullring, assuming you're not too busy getting your face chewed off by, well, I guess what used to be your neighbor. The game still is to be announced when it's going to release, and the trailer does look, well, interesting. Currently all we have so far is wandering around, a few screenshots of fighting zombies with poles. I think it's probably going to be your pretty generic survival. In fact, a lot of the screenshots of the UI look like, well, something that's been put together in about 3 seconds. Not that I'm trying to be too mean, because I'm all for stuff like this. I'm all for people that try something a bit different and a bit new. However, God Save Birmingham is on its way, made by Ocean Drive Studio. They put their name to many games in the past, like Lost Eidolons. Yes, once again, an absolutely insane title. No wonder, guys, you should probably work on your naming, because I've got a feeling there's a reason they're not doing too well, and it's probably not because of the quality of the games, because they seem to be fairly well reviewed. The game is supposedly going to start out in early access like any other survival game, and of course it's going to be your zombie medieval open world. I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes, because there is a lot of potential with this kind of thing. I just hope that they're able to play into, well, what's already come from their incredibly strange name of a game. But hey, I'll be bringing updates, so make sure you stick around the channel for that sort of thing.
Blight Survival is an upcoming medieval 4-player co-op game. and I, for one, cannot wait. We got this vertical slice over a year ago now, and it already blew up to 3.6 million views on the IGN channel. That's not even talking about the tens of millions of views that came from other YouTubers talking about it, and of course reposts of that initial video. We're all absolute basement-dwelling cretins that love medieval shit. But when it comes to something like this, where it's a new concept from a new studio that nobody has heard before, people do start to get a little bit excited, because we're done with the old things of AAA studios bringing out these games of very mainstream and, granted, saturated markets. Modern Warfare, even World War II to some extent. Don't get me started on goddamn Roblox. I know some of you out there play it. You need to get help. I'm here if you need anything. So a 4-player co-op set in this medieval world with realistic gore, apart from the zombies, and enhanced combat that is saying to be a mix between Dark Souls and Mordhau. But we'll get onto that in a little bit. When this trailer came out, 2 people were stated to be on the development team. A development team called Hanir Studios. Mads Christensen wanted to start and try something a little bit different on the Unreal Engine 5, an engine that is famous for creating some of the most beautiful games ever, and this was paramount to their development. You see, with a small budget and a smaller studio, being able to easily access things like blueprints, which is the way the Unreal Engine 5 functions, you don't even have to be a AAA studio to get stuff that looks this good anymore. Not to mention all the very easily accessible assets that sometimes people turn their nose up, saying everything has to be made from nothing. However, if you're a small studio, this stuff can be lifesavers, and you can create some of the most beautiful environments possible. What we saw last year on IGN and GameSpot when they released it was definitely a vertical slice, and the developers admit this. It was a small section, worked as a demo to try and drum up some enthusiasm, trying to get some investors or backing behind it, and that very much beloved promotion. The team was just 2 people, but I think they wanted to grow it to try and create this as more of a mainstream thing, as it started as a side project. This PvE medieval co-op survival needed to have that extra flair, and that's what Unreal Engine 5 gave them. There is a virus that's been going around, these spores that are taking and infesting humans. You have to try and clear them out and move through these lands, doing various side quests in an in-depth story-driven campaign that will be a linear narrative story. See, a lot of the times when you look at a game like this, the first thought is this open world? No. I think that's the first thing to nip in the bud. This is going to be a linear story that's going to take you through a campaign set by the developers. Most of the missions are going to be more or less corridors. Not necessarily in a bad way, but it means that you will be focused on gaining certain objectives to try and find out the lore of this world. Whether it's through stealth, survival, or of course, more brutal combat. And this combat is the thing that I really want to talk about. As someone that has a whole channel that's based on medieval games, I know a good sword fight when I see one. This vertical slice that we saw of Blight Survival very much didn't focus on the combat. It looked like it was plenty of cutscene animations, I mean even rugby tackling zombies and giving them a swift blow to the chops with your shield. But they have said that this is something they're going to be focusing on a little bit later, so hopefully we'll see some expansions on their combat system. In terms of the gameplay itself, they did very much say that what you can see of this guy in full plate armor sneaking around was just a way of indicating some of the stealth sections within the title, because that probably wouldn't seem all that realistic, and they did acknowledge that, saying most of the time you're not going to be sneaking around in full plate armor, but you will be moving through these linear levels, deciding whether you want to go all out and loud, chopping up people, or going around the back and doing some of these slick takedowns, because you will be able to have stealth takedowns, whether it is within a cutscene or this new combat system that they're teasing. And it is the way they introduce these medieval mechanics into a more linear approach that I'd be interested to see how it works, because they are focusing very much on their story. The Steam page itself is all story, talking about this no man's land between 2 desperate kingdoms in a ceaseless war, a purgatory with a new strain of blight that's erupted from the remains of the fallen. It is your job to venture forth and vanquish all-consuming blight, being this medieval version of a COVID response unit. Yet you might notice some of this game feels a little bit similar to what Tarkov was, jumping into arenas, moving through little missions and having side quests, gaining this loot and taking it back to a centralized base. You can then use that to improve your character and of course your friends along the way, being able to collect resources and upgrade your armor, your weapons and your skills, so going into it next time you're going to have a much better advantage and an idea of how each mission works. And definitely through some of the gameplay it seems like Tarkov is not a really far off comparison. Through the Henir Studio official Twitter we've also seen some behind the scenes. The combat system is starting to be revealed, and it definitely looks, whilst it isn't going in depth of a first-person Kingdom Come Deliverance, that directional combat will be there. Slicing from right to left, stabbing, and of course being able to block, strafe, and move out the way of certain enemies. The stealth system has also been revealed and improved upon with stealth takedowns, thus not to notify some of the enemies when you're moving through certain missions. And of course you can do some parkour. Now, whether they lean into realism within this game is always a big question, because as much as I, for one, do love this genre of game, I'm not quite as hardcore as some people, who think everything has to be incredibly realistic as soon as it's set within a period setting. And being able to do forward rolls and vaulting over fences in full plate armor, I wouldn't say is the most realistic thing, although this video disagrees with that. But as much as us basement-dwelling nerds can argue whether this game should focus on historical accuracy or the story in this admittedly fantasy world anyway, it's proven that the attention has been warranted. Not only has this game been reacted to every streamer under the sun, but it seems that funding is on its way. They gained an Epic Game Store grant, which I think was part of them being on Unreal Engine. They now have thousands and thousands of pounds in order to make this game, meaning that hopefully what once was from a hobby project could now be a full-time career.
Finally, of course, I just wanted to talk about Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I think it's the thing that everybody had on their minds, and it took over Gamescom like an absolute storm. Everything from the new gameplay that we saw, the sieges, of course, all the gameplay from when YouTubers got to go to Prague, at least some of them got to go, came out at that point, and we got to see the bigger battles in some cases, a dueling match with Hans Capon, and a better look at some of the combats as well, which I overanalyzed in a video a couple weeks ago, and it was gorgeous. Being able to talk to people on the street and just have that Red Dead Redemption 2 style of interactions, and in terms of Red Dead Redemption 2, I think it's really going to put it up to task with the amount of detail within this game. I mean, KCD is one of the most detailed titles in the last 5 years. 5-6 years or so, and I think the sequel, well, it's only going to ramp it up with 2 maps, both the same size as the first game, making this game twice the size, I promise I'm great at maths, than the original KCD. Means that we're going to have so much gameplay. I'm expecting 30, 40, 50 hours here, especially if you're doing all the side content, which, I mean, the amount of content you're getting out of this is going to be sensational. The detail in the graphics is gorgeous. The sword fighting and the combat in general seems like it's really been turned up a notch. This was a point within the first game that I think a lot of people had some speculative issues with, and of course, well, anecdotal stories of not being able to get to grips with it. But I think it worked well for the game that they were building, and they have brought it back. It is still very much along the same lines in the base of the original combat for KCD, yet they seem to have tweaked it a little bit more, like making parrying and blocking and counters a little bit easier, meaning that for most people, this will be a better alternative and make it a lot easier to actually break into the game itself. New characters that are being brought into the forefront as well as a lot of old ones coming back, like Hans Capon, Father Godwin as well. Teresa seems like she's out of the picture. Henry's love interest seems to have slightly switched, which, you know, you can't blame him. After all, he doesn't know how to read, so he can't exactly be loyal. I think that's how the logic works. That was the excuse I gave last time. However, I do think that we're going to get some really interesting new characters, like Jan Zitska, who was a Czech knight and mercenary. Around this kind of time, he took advantage of King Wenceslas to try and start his own nobility. And I mean, there's a whole Michael Caine film about it if you haven't seen it. But I think we're going to be seeing him coming in. So as well as the big open world, the better combat, and of course the new characters, well, Kingdom Come 2 seems like it's shaping up probably to be in conjunction with a Game of the Year. Not this year, though. Yeah, it was delayed to February of 2025, which means that we are going exactly 7 years after the first game. 6 years, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. 7 years after the first game, which is insane that it's been that long. I'm getting so old. However, I do think it's going to live up to the hype. I'm going to be making plenty of content coming up on its launch, so make sure you stick around the channel. Of course, I just wanted to touch on it because I couldn't make a medieval games that have been shown at Gamescom video without mentioning KCD2. That's kind of had to be a given. But please let me know if there was anything that happened at Gamescom that you're excited about. Any games that I haven't touched on the channel yet, please let me know down in the comments below. But until then, I will see you in the next one.